Thank you, thank you. I want you to know that I never travel outside the U.S. without my dancing partner, Tom Norquist. But before Tom and I get into our dance, I think you ought to know tonight I'm going to talk to you, along with Tom, about what nature really wants you and needs you to know about play.
Everywhere. Out of chaos, order and coordination emerge. Chaos and emergence theory is about self-assembly. As self-assembled systems become increasingly complex, higher order patterns emerge. Out of cosmic dust emerge stars, solar systems, galaxies, and more. Patterns in nature, such as a spiral, can be found everywhere. From the macrocosmic to the microcosmic. Branching is another iconic pattern emerging out of self-organizing complexity, as are the formation of crystals, from snowflakes to rock formations. All biological systems are subject to the same forces of nature, so we can see patterns emerge within different natural formats. Humans are elegantly evolved complex systems with emergent self-organized patterns of increasing complexity. We now know that play is a fundamental survival drive. Long maligned as unproductive or a waste of time, play is how humans and other animals self-organize. The more complex and intelligent the animal, the more playful. Humans are the most playful species and hence the most adaptive and intelligent. However, we all play differently. It is through recognizing patterns of play that we can begin to identify innate talents and intrinsic motivators.
Innate talents and intrinsic motivators. Every one of you has a play nature. And I hope we'll get a little farther along in understanding that as things go through the next 20 minutes or so. But what really is play? Well, it's a little tough to define because it's kind of like love. However, I'm not going to give you every possible pattern of play, but there's one element of play that I think is marvelous. Here's a picture of a polar bear and a sled dog that have just finished an incredible bout of play. Instead of fighting to the death, which we thought they were going to do when I first saw this, they played like old pals. And at the end of their bout of play, they're looking at each other's eyes with full trust. This is part of the wiring of play that you see in animals and in humans. As this mother primate looks into the eyes of her infant, or this infant looks back at us, or this mother looks right into the eyes of her child, what do you think happens? There is an emotional burst of joy that's there in each of them, the baby and the mother, once the baby's capable of a social smile. We call that attunement, and when you want to kind of ruin it by scientific analysis, you wire the baby up with 256 leads of electroencephalograms. You do the same thing with the mother. But when they make eye contact, the brains of the mother and the infant, if you're wired up like this, are in beautiful harmony. They are together. They are bonded. They trust each other. There is joyfulness, and this is the grounding base of play. Now, I kind of like to think about that. I like to think about all the brain function that went on with this. But Tom Norquist is a different sort of character. He listened to this tale that I have and had his own twist on it.
So I'm a professor of practice of industrial and graphic design at Auburn University, one of the nation in the United States top 10 design schools. And one day, one of my students about 6-7 years ago came to me, and we like to do special studio projects. These are like 4-hour-long classes, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And his name was Conrad, and he's like, I just can't figure out what I want to do. And I said, well, let's look in Stuart's book on page 81 through 83, and let's learn about attunement, and let's create something special that we can use in a public play space. And so we built the world's first attunement swing, and it's an interesting story when you think about an attunement swing. It was a swing that the toddler, the 2-3-year-old toddler, you have to put them in a full bucket seat, and you stand by. It's about 2 feet off the ground, and you push them from behind. And the child is full of glee and joy. However, the child also wants you to push them harder and harder. And sometimes people would push them so hard that they would go up and they'd fall out of the swing seat. Sometimes they tipped over. And so we said, well, wait a minute. What happens if the parent controlled that swinging motion and we put them in the seat and we raised them up so we were perfectly attuned, just like the science of play in Stuart's book taught us. And we did that, and we went to the California Park and Recreation Show in March of 2015, and we brought the swing, and I put a little YouTube video out. Have any of you ever been viral before? I have. It was really scary because this little video that we said, hey, come see us, we're in Sacramento, we got this new thing, it's pretty special, we want you to come take a look. And everybody all of a sudden went, whoa, what is this? This is cool. And we had 75,000 views in the first hour. And we went on and had 200 million views. And then we started getting comments on a Facebook page that we put it out on. And everybody looked at me and they said, why didn't you do that before? How come this is so simple, it's so great? So we followed Stuart's lead. We listened. We became a follower and built a product that fully allows parents and children to play together in a magical way. And then I had a woman in Georgia call me and tell me that her child is grown up and too big, and she really wished she could have swung with her because she has a disability. And so we built a bigger version. And now we have 5 different versions, and now Stuart and I can swing attuned together.
So you see, I think you can take a look here and see Bernie DeKoven. Now, Bernie DeKoven wrote a book called Junkyard Games. And Bernie DeKoven is an icon of play. And somebody I've known for years and years, and is just a master because he was a total player. Well, Bernie got toward the end of his life, and he called Tom.
He calls me, and I'm like, Bernie DeKoven, Stuart Brown told me about you. What's up? And he's like, hey, I want to buy one of those expression swings. And I'm like, really? What's up, man? You got a grandchild or something? And he's like, no, I'm dying. And I want that to be my grave marker. And I'm like, what? He said, Tom, I've been in the play field for 50 years, and it epitomizes everything that I've ever stood for, and I want it to be there for everyone to play on, to remember me. And so we built the swing, and I got to spend quality time with Bernie. And he passed away, but now citizens in Indianapolis, Indiana are remembering Bernie too.
Play runs deep, and I think all of you, as you think about the various stages of play, may come up with your own ideas about apparatuses are things which will entrench play into the lives of more and more of us. Now, this next sequence is of a little boy named Sebastiani, and I want you just to listen to him, because think about when a person's unique play personality begins to
Sebastiano
emerge.
is learning that his mother values his activity, while she is learning to appreciate all that he can do on his own. Since he's just beginning to develop voluntary control over his hands, all that's needed is just peace, quiet, and enough space and time to learn about himself through self-initiated, independent activity.
I have a cloth here for you. I'm going to put this here.
Sebastiano's mother has brought the cloth closer to him, and observing that he is comfortable and energetic, leaves him alone in this completely safe space so she can take care of some things for herself. The back of his hand has touched the cloth. He turns and sees it there. He reaches out to feel it. Is this the first encounter with a play object? Going from his back to his side again, he still needs more time to focus on his own body, how it moves, and what it feels like to move. He is organizing himself.
This is play process, and it's amazing if one looks carefully without a bias. One can see the unique intrinsic motivation that is deeply embedded in all of us that prefers certain types of play. Now, when Sebastian grows up, I think he will be an object player. He will like to fix things with his hands, and he'll probably be an engineer. But just to give you kind of a survey, there are various types of play. Object play is one thing we could see early in Sebastiani, but there is rough and tumble play. These two lionesses, from a distance, looked like they were fighting. But there's a particular type of play developmentally that involves curvilinear motion, soft eyes, no claws. They appear to be fighting, but like these two boys, they are engaged in rough and tumble play, which is a normal developmental part of play. And a little later in the talk, we'll get to the fact that I studied some murderers who didn't engage in rough and tumble play. This is partly how one learns empathy, and one learns resiliency, and one learns a little bit about one's own skills through rough and tumble play. Here is object play, and it is amazing that the JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, part of NASA, when they were finding that their prime engineers who are researchers were retiring, they were having some difficulty getting them replaced by good researchers, even though they were Harvard or Caltech or some of the great university graduates with honors. And what they found out was that when they really looked at the history of these highly qualified graduates, if they had been tinkerers, played with their hands when they were young, they were better researchers. They could think in 3 dimensions. So hand play coevolution, object play as part of play process is extremely important. It's what got the U.S. to the moon and the Mars rover, and it is hugely important for creativity, innovation, and hand-brain involvement, along with other types of play, is the key to innovation and creativity later on in life. Here we have body play. This young woman was taken pictures by my son in Santa Cruz as a participant in a triathlon. So body play is part of play, the play itself. So is imaginative play, narrative play, and other types of play that in the 10 minutes and 27 seconds we have left, I won't go through all the details of. Now, here is a picture of the Texas Tower. And on August 1st, 1966, I was a young psychiatrist when a young man went up to the top of this tower, 25-year-old Charles Whitman, He had murdered his wife and mother the night before. He got up to the top of the tower with an armory. He murdered 14 people, wounded 32, and later that afternoon, after he had been killed by police crossfire in the top of the tower because of this terrible tragedy, the governor called along with my boss and said, "Stuart, we want you to understand why this young man did what he did." Well, 16 weeks later and a few $1 million in investigation, 35,000 brain sections and a great deal of evaluation, our commission came to the conclusion that the absence of play behavior, which had been suppressed by a very seriously disturbed father, meant he could not handle his aggression and hostility, which he had hidden well from the rest of the world because he looked like a normal architectural engineering student, which he had to all outside evidences he had been. So that's what cued me in as far as something's going on in play. I didn't really know what it was, but I subsequently studied a group of murderers and then a group of felony drunken drivers who were killed in driving, compared them with a matched control, and found that the violent antisocial men, as compared with normals, had vastly different play histories. The normals had normal play history, friends, toys, birthdays, vacations, remembered things they collected, whereas the murderers and the felony drunken drivers had a vastly different profile. So those are parts of what got me interested into understanding more and more about play. So over the next many years, which as you can tell from looking at me, I'm really an old guy. Anyhow, 6,000 or so reviews later, one begins to get an anecdotal sense of just how important play is to all human beings, not just those who are identified as antisocial. So think of a world, if you would, without play. Empathy is learned through play. You punch someone when you're a little kid on the playground, it hurts them, they punch you back, it hurts you. You begin to sense this is not something that can happen and should happen. So the roots of empathy are sown in play. And play is really operative also in flexibility of mind and thought. Rigidity is a part of non-play. The interpersonal conflict, the movement toward violence, if you're threatened, is lessened when you have an adequate play history. We all know what joylessness and lack of optimism is like. When you don't play, it's really hard to look with optimism toward the future. The predilection to addiction is really notable when one is play deprived. Curiosity, terribly important in a world that needs to solve problems, and play is part of what keeps curiosity alive. And of course, in Saudi Arabia, nobody is a workaholic, so I won't even mention that. But one of the fascinating characters in the study of play, Brian Sutton Smith, said, "You know what the opposite of play is?" And then most people will say, "It's work." He said, "No, it's smoldering depression." So one of the essences of play itself is to put all of these things together into a character. Here's a picture of David Kelly. Now, David Kelly was a professor of physics at Stanford, and he wasn't having much fun. And he said to himself, even though he was successful by a lot of standards, "I'm going to start a company with my friends and have fun." So he started a company called IDEO, now has 850 or so employees. And, you know, he and his friends began to design with a source of play as their motivation. And here is Steve Jobs, who has something to say about play and engagement, but Steve and David got together, and David and his team created the mouse from a source of play. So part of the point that I think Tom made from the attunement swing on up is that play in any of our lives is deeply embedded. It's there for us to use. It is an unused resource of nature for all of us, and somehow we have, in the process of being technologically adept and materialistically oriented, often have lost the sense of just how significant play can be. And here's a list that I kind of want you to look at, because these are some of the benefits of play. And you can read as well as I can. We've already talked about trust, empathy, and optimism, flexibility, attunement. But problem solving, mastery, is one of the essences of that good players have. Joy in movement, keeping your body active, perseverance, engagement, mastery. These are byproducts of play itself. Exploration of the possible. What do we need in a world that needs answers to some of our tremendous conflicts? Play has a part to play in that. Openness to receive unusual, unexpected moments. Cognitive growth, learning. A group that I was associated with in the United Kingdom once said, forget about all this stuff about play, Stuart. Play equals learning, belonging, being in a community, having a sense of unity with others is fostered by play. So, if you take a look at play, it's there from birth to death. I've been a part of a dementia unit where we took play into the lives of individuals who appeared to be cognitively terribly compromised, their need for medication lessened, and their agitation lessened, and the staff was much, much happier because even in dementia, play works. So from birth, attunement, to death, play is there for all of us. And I think we're done ahead of time. That's one of the first times an old guy like me, I usually talk on forever. But, tonight we made it. So, Tom, anything else?
No, we're good. We're good. Ready for questions?
We're ready for questions if you have any.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that. Thank you so much. And I wanted to see if any of our audience has questions for you.
Please.
So does anybody have a question? Okay, we have a question over there.
I promise they weren't planted.
And the gentleman in yellow, can we please give him a microphone?
No worries.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Stuart. Hi, Tom. I would like to comment on the type of object you mentioned. You mentioned object play. So, and nowadays, these days, we're moving to digital gaming,
I can't hear.
Okay.
virtual
Sorry,
reality.
do you mind repeating your question, please?
Yeah, hi, Stuart. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
Yeah, I would like to comment on the object game or object play you mentioned.
Object play.
And these days, we're moving to digital gaming or digital games. So how that affects the children's minds or brains? Is it affecting negatively or positively, or are we going in the right direction?
I'll answer the question by not answering a question. Think about play as a state of being, separate from all others. If you saw that polar bear and the dog, they were in a different state. They'd just finished playing. The two boys in rough and tumble play and the lionesses in rough and tumble play, a different state of being. So you get screenplay, and you can certainly get into real play and a state of being in video games or in screens. No question about it. But if the screen replaces all interpersonal contact, direct, which we're designed by nature to do, smell, sight, taste, sight, then I think, and if the screen becomes omnipresent and addictive, in quotes, then I think it has, for that individual, lost its purpose. And I don't think we know yet what the brain function from early developmental constant screen time will have on the developmental trajectory of those children. Flying here from California, as I did, part of the trip, there were two youngsters sitting next to me who were on screens the entire time, practically the entire flight, and they were really little. And I thought, what's going on? You know, their parents were really happy because they didn't cry, they didn't have any problems. But I thought, you know, this is a flight. They're not looking out the window. They're not talking to anybody. What's going on? So I don't know if that answers your question. How about you, Tom?
So I have 5 grandchildren, and the first thing each and every one of them, including the 2-year-old, wants is either my phone or my iPad. Okay? And I have a 5-acre play park at my residence, which I invite you all to come and visit sometime. It's called the Boneyard in the Garage Mahal. We have a splash pad, and we have all kinds of crazy zip lines, things that are very, very dangerous. Anyways, but they're fun. But I think there needs to be balance. There needs to be balance, and I am totally into screenplay. I'm not very good at it. My 11-year-old grandson beats me every time, but I enjoy that bonding experience of having that play. But I also do outdoor play with him. We do things like climbing and running and chase games, etc. So there's balance. And I think you're going to see play designers bringing in technology. We've already been experimenting with this for the last decade and trying to find this happy medium, because one thing we do know is screenplay is highly addictive. So if I can transfer that highly addictive play behavior to climbing, jumping, screen, all the other things on the playground, ooh, there's something special. So look for that in the future.
I think that's going to be very exciting, to be honest. Yes, I will look for that in the future for my own kids, because I am trying to find that balance between screen time and play time. So I think all mothers are struggling with that these days. I see a hand in the mid, and okay, there's 2 hands, and we only have 1 minute left.
So that should be a challenge.
Okay, no.
My question is that you mentioned the play style. So can you elaborate more, especially that you didn't talk about the narrative side? Because you said there's some kids who like to have some narrative style of playing, and we can foresee what they are going to have as a future career or passions.
I think my answer to that is in the film clip, I finished it by we all play differently. Some kids are narrative players or storytellers. Some kids are strictly body players. Other kids are collecting, stones and 4-leaf clovers if they can. They're collectors. Others are body players. They can't do anything if they're not physically active. Look from within the intrinsic motivation of yourself and the child as to what produces gleefulness. Spontaneous gleefulness and joyfulness, and a sense that you're outside of time, and nourish that. And that will be, there's not a right way or a wrong way to play. There are just lots of different ways to play. How about you, Tom?
We're out of time.
Oh, no worries. If you want to.
Oh, he chickened out. He didn't want to.
So I'll just say this, okay? As a 60-year-old grandfather, I am so excited to share with you how important play is throughout your life. Don't forget how to play. Play every day. Play. If you can find something playful in your work, go there. Play brings joy. It brings happiness. And so if you're involved with whatever type of play trips your, get you going, that's where you want to be. And you need to just trust yourself. Trust your inner self. And be playful. Trust your inner self. I know sometimes people think it looks foolish, but I'd much rather look foolish and live longer and be happy and be healthy than to look, oh, I'm so proper. And then, bang, bye-bye. So find your inner self, your inner joy.
Really an honor to be here. What an incredible building.
Thank you.
Stuart and Tom, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure. Thank you.